The Ain't No Fang Podcast. From Arizona Sports, Ain't No Fang.
Oh, you thought the Diamondbacks were out of this series? Not so fast, my friends. Alex Weiner, Steve Zinsmeister on the Ain't No Fang Podcast, talking about a Game 3 victory at Chase Field. Brandon Pfaadt was fantastic. We're going to talk a lot about him. You get contributions from guys like Pavin Smith and others. We'll talk about them, but it's the walk-off in the bottom of the ninth inning. Ketel Marte, 3 hits. He's been fantastic this postseason and in both of the postseasons that he's played in.
Yeah, dating back all the way to 2017. I mean, he's one of 6 players ever who have started their postseason careers with a 12-game hitting streak. And so we got that last night with 3 hits. He was the offense for a lot of the game. I mean, he almost gave them a lead with that almost a home run. Ball hits off of the wall. He thought it was gone, clearly, by his reaction when he swung. But still, he comes up in the biggest moment of the game. The ninth inning, I guess we'll talk about that. It was a bit wonky in how it kind of unfolded because you start off with Lourdes Gurriel walking and then he steals second. Of all people to get their first stolen base, somebody with 5 stolen bases does it. Moves over to third on a Pavin Smith, his second single, and then it gets thrown out at the plate. And then from there, it's like, okay, they are really, really struggling with runners in scoring position in this game, but they still have an opportunity with 1 out. Perdomo walks, and it sets up Marte. And yeah, Marte has been seeing the ball really, really well all postseason. He's had some big moments already, specifically the game-tying home run against the Brewers in Game 1 to start off the postseason. But yeah, for a guy who's been there for this long and has finally gotten healthy, finally got that breakout season, that bounce-back season from what we saw earlier in his tenure, that was a cool moment for sure.
He's got a hit in every single postseason game that he's played in.
Yeah.
He's the longest tenured Diamondback. There's an interesting tie that might come into play tonight in Game 4 where he came over in a trade with Taijuan Walker, who maybe could pitch for the Phillies in this series at some point, former Diamondback as well.
Sure.
So really awesome night from Ketel Marte, really awesome postseason from Ketel Marte.
He's 6 for 13 this series. I mean, he's been awesome.
Yeah,
so
he's been unbelievable.
And when the rest of the team has really, really struggled to get going. So.
Let's talk about Lourdes again for a second. You mentioned that he gets to third base there in the ninth inning, gets thrown out at the plate. I don't know if I'll call it a base running blunder. It was the infield was in, they made the play. He also got to third another time in the game, and it was first and third, no outs, and that's about as good of a situation as you could ask for. And he doesn't make it home by the end of that inning. That's pretty remarkable. So twice he gets to third base, twice he doesn't end up
third base with nobody out. And
right.
Twice he does not score.
So that's not wonderful. I think this team left 10 on base in this game.
I think they were 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position before the Marte game winner. And the 2 hits were both the Pavin Smith singles that moved a runner from second to third, but didn't score him. Nice play by Bryson Stott in the ninth inning to at least stop that ball from going into the outfield, because that maybe Lourdes scores there. Maybe we're talking about Pavin Smith coming off of the bench and delivering the game-winning shot. So, again, it was just another uneven offensive game from them. Ranger Suarez was terrific. I know we'll talk a lot about Brandon Pfaadt, but they kind of went blow for blow for the first 5 innings. And yeah, just too many missed opportunities there. But at least they were creating chances, which is not something they did in Game 2.
When you talk about the pitching matchup, the lines are almost identical in a lot of ways. Suarez threw 5 1/3. Pfaadt through 5 2/3, probably could have gone longer. We'll talk about that. Suarez only gave up 3 hits. Pfaadt only 2 hits. 7 strikeouts for Suarez, 9 for Pfaadt. They both threw about 70 pitches. Pfaadt, I think the game plan going into this game was to let him throw about 40 to 50 pitches. And so for him to go 70, clearly they gave him a longer leash than they even anticipated needing to do. But he's untouchable in the 6th inning, 5 2/3. He's got Schwarber coming up to the plate for the 3rd time with 2 outs. And Torey Lovullo pulls him for Andrew Saalfrank. A rookie, just came up, but has only given up the 1 run I think he was credited with in this game. That's the first time he's been credited a run against him.
First earned run.
As a professional baseball player at the major league level. He got booed, Torey did, and after the game he even said, man, I was kind of booing myself on the way up to the mound. What did you make of the decision to pull Brandon Pfaadt after 5 2/3 dominant innings, especially in the context of in Game 3 last week at Chase Field, he had pitched 4 1/3 or 4 2/3, and Torey pulled him then and even said the next day, that was a little weird, wasn't it? It's like he almost doesn't even believe in what he's doing, but we know he does because that's why he's doing it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfectly logical sense why they pulled him when they did. He got through the lineup twice. And that has been, you mentioned 40 to 50 pitches. I think it's more like batters. And Torrey has said this dating back to the beginning of September. And like every time Pfaadt starts, like, oh, what's his leash going to be? What's his leash going to be? It's like 18 batters, give or take. And that's exactly what he got through the 18th hitter. He had retired 10 in a row at that point. He had 9 strikeouts. He was the first D-backs pitcher to strike out 9 batters in a playoff game since Brandon Webb in 2007. No walks, which was really, really impressive against this team to just not give them any extra opportunities with runners on base. He was spectacular. And we can go over why he was spectacular. But, like, the decision to take him out, I get it. Like, you want to see him continue to go and just, like, how far can he take this thing? Could he pitch 8 scoreless innings in a legendary performance that people will talk about forever here? But that's just not how they've handled him. And against the Phillies lineup that's this dangerous, and with his numbers against the third time through the order, which in the regular season, opponents were hitting 397 against him with the third time, which is insane. I get it. It also counts like the early season struggles that he had, but they haven't let him get to that point much, at least in the last month and a half when he came back up from the minor leagues. So totally understand the decision. I get wanting to see how far he would go, but they felt like they had gotten deep enough into the game to turn it over to their better relievers to kind of bridge the gap there.
Saul Frank comes into the game, gets the job done, moves on to the next inning. He does get credited with the only run against in this game on
silly run
on the Ryan Thompson wild pitch. But even still, hindsight 2020, who knows? Kyle Schwarber could have come to the plate and could have hit a nuke off of Brandon Pfaadt. You never know.
He did. He had a foul ball that just was towering in his last at bat because Pfaadt didn't make very many mistakes at all. But one that he did was a hanging breaking ball over the middle of the plate to Kyle Schwarber, which he shot like 450 feet. It just was foul. Yeah. So maybe that played into it a tiny bit too. But yeah, Saul Frank, that's not a tough way to give up your first major league run, right?
It wasn't even really your fault.
Like you walked the leadoff hitter.
Yeah, no.
Granted, they didn't give Bryce Harper anything to hit really in this game, so that was clearly a strategy, and he bounced a lot of balls to Harper. They just wanted to pitch around him, but then this little dribbler by Alec Boehm, a double play, and then a wild pitch, and then that's your first run. It's tough.
I think that it is worth mentioning the games that Brandon Pfaadt has been asked to pitch. The 3 assignments he got in the postseason were Game 1 of the entire postseason in Milwaukee of the wild card series because you didn't have either of your 2 aces available. That's a tough ask. He gets the job done. Then they asked him to pitch the game 3, the clincher against the Dodgers. First home game, which is nice, an advantage that you give to your rookie pitcher, but you're asking him to close out the Dodgers. No easy task. Then you give him this game, which is a game 3 that you must win to stay in this series. We know what the odds are of coming back from down 2-0, let alone 3-0, is nearly impossible. So you asked Brandon Pfaadt to do 3 very difficult things, and I think he lived up to all 3 moments. Yeah,
it's, man, just the poise that he showed, the ability to execute. And it's not only that their backs are against the wall, they're placing a red-hot offense with a lot of guys who can go yard on you. I mean, Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper. That's the first inning. That's what you get to try to ease yourself into this. And he attacked. He was in the zone, but not over the middle of the plate. The fastball command was terrific. How he was able to counterbalance the fastball sinker sweeper and tunnel those pitches. I mean, it was like a perfect display of what the Diamondbacks had in mind for him when they moved him to the right side of or to the first base side of the rubber, and how he could kind of deceive hitters. And he got so much swing and miss in that game. I mean, the Phillies hitters were just continuously fooled by how he was able to change up direction, change up eye levels, and just execute everything he was trying to do. It takes a lot for a rookie to be able to do that on the stage. I mean, it's not a easy thing. I mean, I think Sarah Langs had this stat where he's the first rookie, or I think he's the first pitcher ever with consecutive postseason starts of no runs and no walks ever, which doesn't sound like a real thing. And I get that his last start was only 4 1/3, so maybe it's a little bit like, a little less than if he was going 7 innings each time. But that's really, really impressive to get yourself the best opportunities to get these outs, and he was able to do it.
It's funny, I got used to seeing these stat lines of Brandon Pfaadt when he was in AAA.
Yeah.
And even that was impressive because we know the PCL and Reno, that's a place that hitters love to hit. And so he was that impressive in the minor leagues. Now, the major leagues is another story, and he did struggle each of the first 3 times he got called up to the major leagues. The regular season numbers, we know what they are. They're not great, but to do that you were doing in the minor leagues so successfully, to do it against the Phillies at a time when they're the hottest offense in baseball and just took down the Braves, who are without a doubt the best regular season team, it really speaks volumes of Brandon Pfaadt. Okay, so that's Game 3. Game 3 is done and over with. It's their first NLCS win in 22 years.
Yeah.
Pretty remarkable. Let's put that in the rearview mirror. Let's look towards Game 4, which is tonight. Who's going for the Diamondbacks in a game where you've already used Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen went in Game 1, and they said he's not pitching on short rest. So if it's not Gallen, it's not Kelly, it's obviously not Pfaadt. What are the Diamondbacks going to do here in Game 4?
Yeah, the big question was whether or not they would go opener or if they would just pick a starter out of Ryan Nelson, Slade Ciccone, and then have a really, really tight leash and then go from there. Makes all the sense in the world. They're going to go with a lefty opener. They're going with Joe Manaply. So he will go up against, that Schwarber, Turner, Harper trio. Try to get a little bit ahead of it, not having like Ryan Nelson or Slade Ciccone face Harper and Schwarber in the first inning, get those lefty matchups you want, and then kind of piece it together from there. I don't know whether or not they go with their long guys right after, like in the second inning. Like, let's say Manaply gets 1, 2, 3, and then you're looking at like Bohm, Stott, Real Muto, Castellanos. Maybe that's when you put one of those guys in and hope that they can get you 2 innings and then you can pick the next one. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work, but it's going to be pieced together in a pretty unorthodox way where it's like, I hope everybody is on today kind of a deal, because the Phillies won't have to do quite that. They're going to go with Christopher Sanchez, young pitcher, 26, first postseason experience, hasn't pitched in the playoffs this year, lefty, but he's somebody, they clearly like the Diamondbacks. They had a top 3. It was a more established top 3 because Pfaadt's a rookie and Ranger Suarez pitched in the playoffs last year. So now they go to Sanchez. We'll see what kind of leash. You teased the Taijuan Walker deal earlier. Maybe they piggyback. I don't know. But what I'm interested in, too, is what the D-backs lineup looks like. Because they actually made some changes for the first time this postseason going into Game 3. They were facing a lefty, so usually they flip Ketel and Corbin at the top of the order. But they decided to take Alec Thomas out and put Emmanuel Rivera in. They switched Moreno and Pham. They moved Longoria to DH, and they put Rivera at third. It was a tough day at the plate for Rivera, coming up in big spots and hitting the ball right to the shortstop a couple of times. So do they continue to adjust? Would they like Alec Thomas for defense, knowing that the pitching is going to be a little bit more questionable? We'll see, but those are decisions to make.
Yeah, and honestly, some of those decisions are because they were facing the lefty Ranger Suarez, but I think some of those decisions might have been made regardless. Just the way Tommy Pham hadn't been hitting. He did get one hit yesterday. But he had just been completely cold at the plate, so to move him down a little bit in the lineup made some sense to me. Gabby's been really hot in the postseason. And
he almost homered.
And this is a guy who's already got 3 homers in the postseason, and I think he only hit 7 in the regular season, as good as he was. So I think that they made some lineup changes for the better yesterday to jumpstart this offense. It seemed to work. They got enough out of the offense that they were able to win the game, obviously. But I think you're right. I think that Game 4 is going to be a little bit of gamesmanship from both teams. Throwing Joe Manaply, that's more out of necessity. The Diamondbacks just don't have a lot of starting pitching options at this point. The Phillies do. They could throw Taijuan Walker right out of the gate. They aren't. They could have thrown Michael Lorenzen, a guy that they acquired at the trade deadline who had a really good first half. They could have thrown him.
He threw a no-no and then kind of
disappeared. Yeah, but they could have thrown him in a situation where they're up in the series if they needed to, but they're going to go with a lefty as well. And I do wonder if that's kind of the same reason the Diamondbacks are, because then we can alter the other team's lineup a little bit early in the game, which then could lead to you emptying the bench. It's a strategy that Torey Lovullo used pretty effectively against the Dodgers, because they had a bunch of those lefty guys, Jason Hayward at the tail end of the lineup, where if we can get him out early and replaced with Chris Taylor or whoever, then you start to empty the bench and there's less options for teams later in the game. So I think game 4 is a little bit of gamesmanship on both sides for me. And then really game 5, which the Diamondbacks yesterday solidified they will play a game 5 on Saturday at Chase Field. That's going to be a heck of a matchup. You'll get the Zacks again, Zach Gallen and Zach Wheeler, who was fantastic in game 1, but this time at Chase Field, and you're hoping that you get home Zach Gallen rather than road Zach Gallen. They've been very different things this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was looking up the Rob Thompson quote about how he plans to piece together the pitching, and he gave a very Rob Thompson answer. We'll figure it out. So there you go.
Well, I mean, Torrey didn't give a much clearer answer yesterday.
No, he didn't. He didn't announce it during his post-game presser. It was announced afterwards.
He was playing it coy. He was like, "Yeah, we'll get that name to you guys," which kind of told me that they already knew. I mean, they've been game theorying.
They just had
to
tell him. Yeah, I think that was the big deal. But yeah, going back to the point. Yeah, they extend the series to 5 at least. It's a big deal. I mean, yeah, sure, Gallen wasn't great in game 1. He made a few mistakes. Ultimately, the Phillies crushed every mistake that he made, and so maybe it looked a little worse than it was. But yeah, to give your ace another chance at home, I think is a big deal. And I mean, today's game's going to be a little weird, but at least you put yourself on a track where, okay, if you can rely on your ace to get you another win, and then you go back to Philadelphia, you have Kelly and Fott. You don't have to deal with this piecing together a game here. You only have to deal with that in game 4. Kelly has been very good this postseason. Terrific against the Dodgers. I thought he was mostly fine against the Phillies in that first game. Again, kind of similar to Gallen. He made a couple mistakes early and they crushed it. And after that, I thought he was totally fine. And then Fott's been terrific. So at least, it's one of those where it's I'm sure a lot of people around the country thought the series was over after the first 2, especially with a 10-0 result in game 2. But to at least give yourself the opportunity to line up your pitching in that way, if all goes right, I think gives them at least, a little bit of a runway here.
So we're heading into game 4 tonight, game 5 tomorrow, as you mentioned. I do think that we should at least bring up Corbin Carroll in this situation. He went 0 for 4 yesterday. Anything to be concerned about there? I'm not overly concerned. I do think going into game 3, I was still curious whether or not if Corbin Carroll made it on base, would he finally try to attempt to steal second base? And it seems very trivial because if he had stolen second base to lead off games 1 or 2, that doesn't necessarily mean they win the game.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the mindset. It speaks to the chaos that they try to create, and we've talked a lot about that mantra during this postseason.
I actually spoke to Dave McHale about it a little bit yesterday.
Okay, what did he have to say?
I mean, the Phillies are doing a great job of keeping him there, of Muramuto looking over, giving signs with his glove to Nola when to throw over. Nola was slide stepping. They were doing what they could to keep him there. And ultimately, and that worked in that at bat. I mean, it looked like Carroll was going to go once or twice, but they were able to throw it over. They just didn't have that many opportunities to then try to be aggressive on the bases because they didn't get anybody on the bases. I mean, you finally saw it in game 3 where they get a few base runners and then you're going up against relievers who are less equipped to keep the guys there, and somebody like Lourdes Gurriel steals and Pavin Smith takes second on a defensive indifference, and they just have more opportunities to create that chaos if they get on base. And that's sort of the big takeaway, I guess. It's yeah, sure, 2 times in a row he doesn't take off, but they were doing a good job trying to keep him close to the base, and he didn't feel like he was going to get the jump to go, and so he didn't go.
You mentioned the only guy who swiped a bag in game 3, Lourdes Gurriel. He took off before the pitcher, before he lifted his foot. I mean, he took off early.
Yeah.
And he probably doesn't make it there unless he does take off early, so maybe that was part of the strategy, was I'm going no matter what. Which
they saw something with Kimbrel. He wasn't going to look over, and he went.
Yeah, and we could talk all day about whether that's smart or not, especially with the Gold Glove catcher behind the dish. But yeah, no, you're right. They haven't had a ton of opportunities. I don't expect Corbin Carroll. He very rarely has games like this where he's 0 for 4, 0 for 5, and does absolutely nothing to impact the game.
He almost had a hit in this game, but it was a really, really nice play from Bryson Stott moving over to his glove side to make a sliding play and get him at first base just in time. So, if that ball squeezes through, I think Cattell was on second base at the time because that was after one of his doubles. And so if that ball squeezes through, I don't know, maybe Cattell scores and the game looks a little bit different. So part of it is that he's had some early count outs, broke a handful of bats in Philadelphia, it seemed like, especially against Zach Wheeler. So, it hasn't been the smoothest series for him, but he's had a great postseason otherwise. And so, I don't know. We'll see.
If you want a really bright spot going into a bullpen game, the bullpen's been fantastic. Now, granted, they were only asked to do 3 1/3 innings yesterday.
Yeah.
Not like today where they're basically asked to do all 9 in some way, shape, or form. But Saul Frank gets credited with the run, but it wasn't super his fault. He did walk the leadoff runner.
It was a strange run.
Thompson, I guess you could fault him for the wild pitch, obviously. Yeah. I thought he could have rushed to home plate a little bit quicker, and maybe they would have had a chance to throw him out because that ball ricocheted off the wall right back to Gabby.
Yeah.
Ginkel was fantastic. Paul Sewald continues to be really, really good as well. So, all things considered, heading into a bullpen game, your bullpen has been really, really good. So it's not...
And even the other guys, like Luis Frias has been terrific.
Yeah.
And that's, another option probably that they're going to need at some point today. So.
Yeah, they're going to need more than, what did they pitch? The 4 guys yesterday. 5 total pitchers yesterday's game. I'm thinking today is probably closer to 7 or 8.
I'm really curious what they do as far as like the Nelson Ciccone duo.
The second guy on the mound. The first guy out of the pen today.
Yeah, how long do they go? How do those guys handle it? Because Nelson didn't look great in Philadelphia, but that game was out of hand at that point anyway, so maybe it's a little bit different. Weird stuff, the pop-up, I don't know. But Ciccone looked a little bit better. I don't know. We'll see what they go there. But those 2 guys, I mean, everybody else can do their jobs, but if the Phillies score 5 runs in 3 innings there, then that might be it. I don't know. So we'll see.
I love asking you this question. I've asked you this a couple times over the last few weeks in the postseason. The Diamondbacks will win Game 4 tonight if...
they score more than their opponent.
Okay, John Madden. Magic Johnson over here.
All they have to do is score more. And no.
Like, what's the one big thing?
I think just continuing to give yourself opportunities to score. It doesn't have to be, like, obviously slug would help a ton. And they almost got some yesterday. I mean, Cattell hits one off the wall. Gabriel Moreno hits one. It would have been a home run in 26 ballparks, according to StatCast. So, obviously, getting those big breaks would be huge, but creating opportunities where those breaks become even bigger by being disciplined at the plate and walking, like Perdomo was able to do down 1-2 in the 9th inning against Craig Kimbrell. That was a huge, huge at-bat, and it gave Marte the ability to, deliver the walk-off with, allow Pavin Smith to walk home. So at bats like what we saw close towards the end of the game, a few of those at bats by Pavin Smith where he was able to work it a little bit and then get enough of the barrel on it to get through. So I think just being able to create opportunities for yourself to score. They weren't great with runners in scoring position yesterday, but even if it's a scenario today, if they're 3 for 12 with runners in scoring position, but those 3 hits score 4 runs, that might be the biggest difference. So I think that's the biggest thing. Because we don't know what's going to happen with a bullpen game. Somebody could be totally off and an inning can get away, or everybody could be great. So I think as far as being what you're able to sort of control, I think that would be it.
The Diamondbacks get a win in this series in Game 3 back at home at Chase Field behind Brandon Pfaadt, the rookie pitcher, and as well as 3 hits from Ketel Marte, including the walk-off in the bottom of the 9th. Can they even the series tonight? Well, we're going to find out, and you can get all your post-game coverage at arizonasports.com and the Ain't No Fang podcast. We will be with you tonight after Game 4. For my friend Alex Weiner, I'm Steve Zinsmeister. We want to thank you for checking out the Ain't No Fang podcast at Arizona Sports, the local sports leader.